Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, September the 4th, 2025. Today I want to talk about some news from the United Kingdom, and it relates to the arrest of comedian and comedy writer Graham Linehan, who was arrested on Monday at Heathrow Airport because of some tweets he had made. I think he made them in April, relating to his views on the trans issue. And he was, I think, arrested for incitement to violence. And, this is a big news. I mean, he was just making some tweets. He was expressing his opinions. And now he's being arrested. People are saying, this is the end, or an example of the end of freedoms in the UK, how Britain is like turning into North Korea, and it's not just British news, I think it has become global news. So in this video I want to look at the horoscope of Graham Linehan. I don't have his time of birth, but I do have his day of birth, and also what was going on at the time of his arrest. But before I look at Graham Linehan, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, September the 4th, 2025. So here is the chart for today, and you can see that the moon is now in Aquarius. So there it is, moon at 3 degrees Aquarius at noon New York time. So the moon moves into Aquarius London time at 11:32 a.m. So, if you're in Europe or Africa, then, late morning, early afternoon, the moon changes sign from Capricorn to Aquarius. It is changing sign into just another Saturn-ruled sign. Saturn rules Capricorn, Saturn rules Aquarius, but it is still a change. I mean, we've got a situation where the moon is moving from an earth sign into an air sign, moving from a negative sign into a positive sign. So there could be some more action here, and there might be some more variety. And additionally, the moon, when it makes this sign change, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. So we've got moon conjunct Pluto, and this conjunction to Pluto may make us perhaps more sort of intense than usual. I mean, Capricorn is not a particularly intense sign for the moon. I mean, it's perhaps a very focused sign, focusing on our own interests. And now that the moon is changing sign, it's not just about it being in Aquarius. That conjunction to Pluto, allows us to focus on things which, could be serious, and we perhaps become aware of our power or our lack of power. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? And the moon additionally is making a trine, I think, making a trine to Uranus. So that's a feature of today. So as the moon moves into Aquarius, it makes a trine to Uranus. So that reminds us that in the sky, right now we have got this Uranus-Pluto trine. I mean, this Uranus-Pluto trine, it's a trine between two sort of outer planets, and it's quite collective. And so perhaps you could say with Uranus trine Pluto, this is a time when people are restless, when the collective is restless. People want change, and maybe they want dramatic change. And this trine between Uranus and Pluto is separating, but it's still pretty strong. And although Uranus will eventually move out of Gemini into Taurus, it's still going to be in the offing. And when Uranus eventually moves back into Gemini next year, we're going to feel it again. So it's not just a one-day wonder, this Uranus-Pluto trine, and the moon is going to be picking up on it, making the conjunction to Pluto, making the trine to Uranus. And additionally, moon is making a sextile to Saturn, making a sextile to Neptune. So moon is picking up on quite a lot. And yeah, it is in Aquarius, and Aquarius is future orientated and it's independent minded. And you could argue that the cosmos is encouraging us to be independent minded. Now, there are a few non-lunar aspects which I think are of importance. Mercury is making semisquares to Mars and Jupiter. So we have a Mars-Jupiter square forming. This Mars-Jupiter square, not exact today, I think it's exact tomorrow. It's getting really close. So you could say that this Mars-Jupiter square is starting to dominate proceedings. Mars-Jupiter is just not entirely happy with the way things are going, wants to be able to act, is maybe feeling frustrated if it doesn't get free rein. And now we've got Mercury right on the midpoint of Mars and Jupiter. And I think this really does matter. So you could say that even though the Mars-Jupiter square is exact tomorrow on Friday, the fact that Mercury is picking up on this Mars-Jupiter energy, might indicate that, things are really happening. I was talking quite a lot about Mercury yesterday, but Mercury continues to be important. It really does dominate proceedings at the moment. And of course, Mercury is about conversation, it's about what we say, it can be about propaganda, and it can be about sort of agitation. Right? Remembering that we have just had Mercury square Uranus. Okay, that Mercury square Uranus is 3 degrees apart, but again it's still pretty strong. And now it's on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. Now, whether Mercury on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint is a good thing or not kind of depends. I think if you look at Reinhold Ebertin and his interpretations in the combination of stellar influences, he sees Mercury on a Mars-Jupiter midpoint as being pretty fortunate, successful action, being able to organize things. But you could also see Mercury as a trigger, as like a detonator. So the Mars-Jupiter square might be the explosive, and then Mercury detonates the whole thing and it causes the big bang, especially as Mercury is semi-square Uranus. And we also have a decile between the Sun and Mars. And so here it is, Sun and Mars are 36 degrees apart. And it's kind of more of the same. I mean, the Sun and Mars are two sort of masculine, fiery planets. And they're about action. That they can certainly take things too far. You put Sun and Mars together and you get anger. And so, what does it mean for the Sun and Mars to be in decile aspect? Well, decile, that's number 10, 36 degrees. 10 is 5 times 2. 5 is about the will, about what we are trying to create, what we are trying to make happen. And so with Sun, decile, Mars, we are trying to create effects. Some of us are. And we're trying to push things. And we don't want to be ignored. And so it's not a natural aspect, a sun decile Mars. And it has to be thought about. We have to consider, what are we going to do? What kind of action do we need to take? And yeah, there might be a lot of careful planning there. And Saturn is opposition, the midpoint between the Sun and Mars. So Mars is really reinforcing this, it's perhaps many of us might feel a certain degree of frustration. We can't get things done. We get angry. We get annoyed. And so what do we do? What is the right thing to do? Well, the wrong thing to do is just to get annoyed for the sake of it. I mean, you can imagine Saturn on the Sun-Mars midpoint, from a negative perspective, could be, feeling frustrated, having to perhaps lash out, doing things without necessarily thinking because we feel that we're under pressure. That's the negative way of looking at it. The positive way of looking at it is to see Saturn as a constructive energy and say to ourselves, well, okay, there's something that's bothering us, there's something that's frustrating us, so what are we going to do about it? Let's make a plan. And we can make a plan, and if we stick to the plan, with this Sun decile Mars, we can eventually find a way of using our energy effectively and getting things done and making an impact. So that is the position in sort of New York. If we reset the chart for Sydney, Australia, as a representative of New Zealand and East Asia. Sorry to keep repeating myself, but I just want to make it clear that you understand what this chart is about. So if you reset the chart, you see that Moon is in late Capricorn. And so if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, then the Moon is going to be in Capricorn pretty much all day. It will go into Aquarius late in the day, but it's more of a Moon in Capricorn day. You don't get the Moon in Aquarius until right at the end, and the Moon in Capricorn, well, it's making a sextile to Saturn, and that sextile to Saturn is quite a grounding influence, and so it's perhaps more of an earthy day if you're in Australasia. There's perhaps not so much craziness compared to the Americas, but that would be because the Moon is not conjunct Pluto and it's not making a trine to Uranus. The Mercury semisquare Mars, Mercury semisquare Jupiter, Mercury on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, still there. That's there in Australasia. So it's not like there's a huge amount of difference. There's just a slight difference of emphasis. In Australasia, the Moon is, it's in Capricorn. It's, as I've said earlier, it's perhaps the negative aspect of Saturn trying to keep things together, rather than the positive aspect of Saturn, Aquarius, which is trying to create something new, and that can wait until tomorrow. The Moon will eventually go into Aquarius, wherever you are. And finally, there is the heliocentric view, so putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. The grand trine is finally starting to break up. That grand trine between Mars, Jupiter, and the Earth is perhaps losing its power. Mars is separating from its trine to Jupiter. The Earth is now very much separating from the trine to Jupiter. So, you could say it's losing its power. But on the other hand, the heliocentric trine to Mars, between Mars and Jupiter, is separating. But of course, the heliocentric trine is separating, but the geocentric trine, of course, is still, very much there. And you might say that, Mars is on the Earth-Jupiter midpoint. So there's still a lot we want to express. We're not entirely done with this grand trine. And additionally, we have Venus is square Saturn, and Venus square Saturn might indicate a degree of coolness. but it is a heliocentric chart. It's not geocentric, and so you could say with Venus square Saturn, some people are trying to keep their distance. This kind of links with the moon being in Capricorn or Aquarius, moon in a Saturn-ruled sign, that people don't necessarily want to get too close, and there may be things which just can't be expressed necessarily on an emotional level. But I wouldn't read too much into that Venus-Saturn square. I think the continued influence of the grand trine between the Earth, Jupiter, and Mars is perhaps the thing to take away from this heliocentric chart. So now I want to consider the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, September the 4th, 2025. Aries. Mars is getting very close to a square of Jupiter. The square happens tomorrow, I think, but it might as well be exact today. And we've got Mercury making a semi-square to Mars. We've got Mercury making a semi-square to Jupiter. So it is all happening. And so Aries, perhaps you need to ask yourself, what do you want to do? And, how much energy have you got? And are you able to utilize this energy? So really do think about your energy levels and think about, what might be frustrating you. And, don't hold back, but at the same time, don't do anything stupid. And, it's important that you are able to focus this energy constructively and also understand the constraints that might be upon you, or the imagined constraints. Mars is in Libra. It's in your opposite sign. And so with Mars in your opposite sign, you may at times feel that you have to consider other people. You might have to consider circumstances beyond your control, and that might not be something you want to do, but you might then feel that you have to, and that could be frustrating. And so with this Mars square Jupiter, there is some danger that if you can't fully assert yourself, that you might blame other people. There are things you wanted to do, but you can't do it because you've got to consider other people, or you have in your imagination these people who in your imagination are trying to hold you back. Perhaps you're thinking about them and you're thinking, well, if you were to do this, you are absolutely certain they would try to stop you, or you are certain that they would be upset or offended. But can you really make assumptions about what other people are thinking or feeling? Are you really going to upset them? Maybe if you're just clear, that's enough. You just tell people what you want to do. You don't spring any surprises. You say you want to do this, and they might say it's fine. And even if they do object, their objections might not be quite as strong as you had imagined. And so, maybe it's a good idea to talk about what you're planning and talk about what you would like to achieve. And it's quite possible that you'll get a sympathetic response. And, also, you might be looking at a Mars-Jupiter square, which seems to be a stressful aspect, seems to be about constraint and anger. But heliocentrically, we've still got a Mars-Jupiter trine. And so at a higher level, there is a way for you to express yourself freely. It really can happen. And even if there are constraints, there are always ways around them. And, we've got another aspect involving Mars, and that is the decile between the Sun and Mars. And so, the Sun and Mars, 36 degrees apart. Sun and Mars are very dynamic planets. And so you could see the Sun as being about your selfhood. And Mars, well, kind of also is about your selfhood. The two aspects of yourself, very positive aspects of yourself. And you want to bring them together. And you really want to pack a punch and show the world what you can do. And you might just think that it's all impossible, but it's not impossible. And you have to remember that we've got this sort of midpoint configuration where we've got this Sun-Mars decile, but when Saturn is on the midpoint, and so Saturn on the Sun-Mars midpoint, it sounds a bit grim, but it allows you to structure yourself, to take that energy which just really wants to show itself, and you can take this energy and you can really do something with it, but it requires planning, and you have to decide how you're going to go about it, being very clear about what you want to achieve, what your targets are, perhaps have a list of your goals, and if you can do that, then I think you're going to be very successful. Now, as an Aries, that might not be something you want to do. You are a very spontaneous person. You like to do things on the spur of a moment. But remember also that the Sun is in Virgo. Virgo likes to go through the details, making sure that everything is in order. And so Aries is just about accepting the constraints of the times and acting accordingly. And if you just do a bit of planning and you show a bit of focus and discipline, then I think that you're going to be able to use that energy, and your energy is not going to make you frustrated. It's not going to trip you up. It's actually going to propel you forward, and you can actually, really demonstrate the full power of your personality. Taurus. You, at the moment, Taurus, could be quite ambitious. There are things you want to achieve, and that's especially the case once the moon moves into Aquarius. So moon moves into Aquarius pretty early in the day. If you're in the Americas, in the UK, it's at 11:32 a.m. In Europe, an hour later. So it's happening. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you might have to wait until this evening. But when the moon does move into Aquarius, it's going to be a time, Taurus, when you're going to want to really think about what you want to do, what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and I think that your ambitions are going to be important. You do have powerful ambitions. I mean, you've had these ambitions for a long time, and now that Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto's been in Aquarius now for the best part of a year, and with Pluto in Aquarius, it's a time, Taurus, that you need to really think about what you want to achieve, and you shouldn't allow yourself to be too limited. There are really things you really want to do which may be ambitious, maybe over-ambitious, but there's no such thing as over-ambition, particularly with Pluto now in Aquarius. And this picture of Pluto in Aquarius, don't forget, it stays in Aquarius for a couple of decades. I mean, it's a major event. And with the moon making a conjunction to Pluto, it's a time to sort of tune into that Pluto power and, do think about, what you can do. And if anything is holding you up, Taurus, then you can create the change. The changes just come sort of very easily. And if you're clear about it, you don't keep it to yourself, and you make it absolutely obvious that you're not going to be held back, then I think that people will oblige. And so that, to my mind, looks pretty good, and you're going to have, I think, it's sort of a natural ability to explain yourself. And I mean, people might not fully understand what you're talking about, but they will know that you're serious, and that's what matters. And also, at the moment, you can really give quite a good account of yourself. I mean, people might not be listening to you 100%, but it's the way you say things. It's not just the words themselves, but it's the way you project these words. And if you are free speaking, people will immediately know that you are serious, and you can argue your point with great passion, and a passion which will leave a lasting impression. And at the same time, you can make people feel good about you, and you can make people feel good about themselves. And this has been something that's been going on over the last few days. I have been talking about it in relation to Taurus. I've been talking about your optimism and your positivity, and the way you can, encourage people to think the best. And so, do take, every opportunity to, be nice to people, to be enthusiastic. Because, if you are enthusiastic about, other people's ideas, then they're more likely to be enthusiastic about whatever it is that you're planning on doing. Now, as far as close relationships are concerned, Mars is getting a few aspects today. Don't forget, Mars is applying to a square of Jupiter, and Mercury is semi-square Mars. And so with these aspects to Mars, that might say something about the other person, whoever that other person might be, and whatever relationship you might be in, whatever the purpose of this relationship. So, it's not just you that want action, it's the other person, whoever that other person might be. And they might be impatient and agitated, and you need to make some effort to understand that agitation. And, you certainly have to address it. And that's another good reason to be positive. So if someone wants action and they're feeling frustrated, you can't just tell them, to wait. No, you have to, listen to what they're saying, and, give them an opportunity to be themselves. And sometimes people are just going to be obnoxious. It will happen. Some people are just not going to listen. They could be quite aggressive. Again, I'm not saying this is going to be the case, but if you do find that someone is just only thinking about themselves, has an aggressive posture, what can you do? Well, you can try to sort of mollify them, but sometimes people just need to be left to their own devices. They need to work off their own energy in their own way. So that's something you might want to consider. Gemini. Mercury is making a couple of semisquares. It is semi-square Mars, and it is semi-square Jupiter. And, if you've been looking at my videos, you will know that I regard the semi-square aspect as being really important. That semi-square means 45 degrees. And the reason is that a semi-square is half a square. I mean, you can follow it through. You have a conjunction, and then you have an opposition. Opposition is 180 degrees. Then you have a square, which is half of 180 degrees, which is 90 degrees. And then you go down from a square, you get to the semi-square, or the sesquiquadrate, 135 degrees, 45 degrees, 135 degrees. They're the same. I mean, they have the same impact. And so with Mercury semi-square Mars and Mercury semi-square Jupiter, like many people today, and it's not just a Gemini thing, you are feeling agitated. You want something to happen. You might be feeling tense and somewhat nervous, on edge. You know something has to change. You know something has to happen, and that sort of inner nervousness does have to be expressed. But it's just important to express it in the right way. So you could say with Mercury semi-square Mars that you might say things. I mean, that's one interpretation of Mercury semi-square Mars. You might say things which you later regret. You say something on the spur of a moment. You're annoyed. You're agitated. You just can't help yourself. Or even if you're not annoyed, you might sort of speak out of turn and you might upset someone. That is possible. But Mercury semi-square Mars is not just about aggravation. You could say, well, Mercury and Mars, they're in aspect, so that does give you the opportunity to speak freely. And also Mercury is semi-square Jupiter. Mercury semi-square Jupiter is about your optimism. You wanting to take things further and further and further. You're not satisfied with any particular limit, and you want to go beyond those limits. And the question is that the right thing to do? Is it possible to go too far? So you might regard Mercury semi-square Mars and Mercury semi-square Jupiter as just being these rather aggravating, over-the-top aspects that could get you into trouble. But what you could also do is you could bring it all together and say, well, we have got a Mars-Jupiter square coming up, and Mercury is on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. And it's, you can really see that in the chart, that Mercury is on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. There's Mercury 45 degrees from Jupiter, 45 degrees from Mars. And so Mercury on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint can be fortunate. It allows you to be very effective, and you can apply yourself very well, and also you can just organize things very well. And perhaps it's because your brain and your activities are in accord with one another. So if you want something to happen, it really can happen. You can make it happen. And so rather than just be frustrated, blame other people, blame the world, instead just make it happen. You've got an idea, and that idea can be made into something that is very real. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, Mercury is semi-square Mars, and that is a tense aspect, and there are a number of ways of looking at that Mercury semi-square Mars. Sorry, it's a Mercury semi-square Jupiter that matters here. Mercury semi-square Jupiter. So what's the relevance of Mercury semi-square Jupiter to relationships? Well, Mercury is ruler of your sign. Sorry, I switched from Taurus to Gemini a bit late there on the chart. Mercury is ruler of Gemini, and Jupiter is ruler of your opposite sign. It's ruler of Sagittarius. So you might interpret Mercury semi-square Jupiter as like you and someone else having a disagreement. You don't necessarily see eye to eye. And that is certainly possible. You mustn't assume that you and those closest to you are on the same wavelength. And so, what do? Well, I think you're careful what you say, and you give other people an opportunity to express their needs and their emotional needs as well. Mercury is in Virgo and Jupiter is in Cancer. So you could say that with Jupiter in Cancer, that represents a person who has emotional needs, who might be sort of defensive, and they have a long memory, and they're certainly more emotional than you are. So if you're dealing with people who are more emotional than you, then you really treat them very carefully. really listen to them, and don't shoot your mouth off. Use your feelings to work out what the best approach is. And of course, being a Gemini, using your feelings, it doesn't always work, and especially the case when you're dealing with people who perhaps have a greater emotional intensity than you. So relationships, I'm not saying relationships are going to be a disaster or anything like that. I'm just saying that relationships need to be treated with a high degree of sensitivity. Cancer. The moon is changing signs. It's moving out of Capricorn and it's moving into Aquarius. And so the question is, what kind of change do you experience when this is happening? Well, I think that it doesn't matter at one level. I mean, you're still going to be taking yourself quite seriously. I mean, your limits. That's true. But perhaps with Moon in Capricorn, you're particularly aware of these limits. You know that you can't take things too far, and also you're aware that other people can't be ignored. There are forces out there which can constrain you, so you can't do everything with Moon in Capricorn. And when the moon changes sign and moves into Aquarius, things do change. It's not so much about other people. It's more about you, and I think that you become, in a way, more serious and perhaps more emotional. Now you might say, well, that doesn't necessarily make sense because the moon is moving into Aquarius, and Aquarius has perhaps a reputation for being a sign that isn't particularly emotional. But you have to remember that when the moon moves into Aquarius, it starts to make a conjunction to Pluto. So moon conjunct Pluto can be quite intense, and moon and Pluto will be in fixed signs. So Cancer, you might want to sort of hold on to things very tightly, and you don't really want to reveal more than you have to. And so if you take everything seriously, and you also understand that there are limits to how much other people can be relied on, and you don't have to worry all the time about what other people are saying and what other people are thinking. So you could say the moon moving into Aquarius makes you more independent-minded and more of an individual, because the moon doesn't just make a conjunction to Pluto, it also makes a trine to Uranus. And you all have your own different ways of being and your different ways of being different. Moon trine Uranus, and this Uranus-Pluto trine, because we're dealing with two outer planets, they're in trine with one another. For the moment, Uranus is going retrograde. It is moving away from that trine to Pluto, but it's still there, and it's about the desire to be different, to be rebellious, perhaps. And so, with the moon conjunct Pluto trine Uranus, you're aware of what makes you different, and perhaps you're also aware of what's going on in the universe and how best to respond to it, because things are happening. There's a lot going on out there. Things aren't static, and everyone's getting tense. Everyone's feeling that change is just around the corner, and you, Cancer, like everyone else, is aware of this change. And I think with moon conjunct Pluto, moon trine Uranus, you're perhaps asking yourself, well, what do you need to do? What do you need to do to stand out? And you can do that. I know that Cancer as a sign has a reputation for being traditional and for sort of putting a high emphasis on safety and security. I mean, in theory, that kind of makes sense. But then you look at Cancerians, Elon Musk is a Cancerian, Julius Caesar was a Cancerian. I think Alexander the Great was a Cancerian. And so Cancer is a very powerful sign. And I think that one of the reasons that cancers can be so powerful is because they understand what's going on. They understand the way the universe is changing. They understand perhaps broader planetary patterns. I mean, they may not literally understand it. They may not know anything about astrology, but they're just in tune with it. They're in tune with the cosmos. And if you're in tune with the cosmos, then you can anticipate what's going to happen next. And also perhaps you can harness the power of the cosmos for your own purposes. So I think that this moon conjunct Pluto, moon trine Uranus could, very much work in your favor. Additionally, the moon does make a sextile to Saturn. So just before leaving Capricorn, moon at 29 Capricorn, it makes a sextile to Saturn. So there's a Saturn relationship so there's a moon relationship to Saturn there, sign by sign. So especially at the beginning of the day, especially if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you do have a chance to perhaps make up with people or to understand people, to at least get on with them at some level. So it's not a day where you have to be sort of completely independent minded, especially before the moon moves into Aquarius. I think once the moon does move into Aquarius, I think that you're going to be sort of more focused on yourself and your independence and what you need to do to make an impact. And with moon in Aquarius, you might be of a view that there are a few things that need to be discussed. You perhaps want to keep it to yourself, and the one person you can trust is you. And other people's input may be less than helpful. Leo, I can see how potentially you might feel rather frustrated today. Perhaps it's because we've got Mercury making a semi-square to Mars, making a semi-square to Jupiter. Mercury at the moment, it's in Virgo, and Mercury in Virgo can be about money, especially as the Sun is in Virgo as well. It's in an Earth sign. Of course, you've got the Sun, your ruler, in an Earth sign, and there could be financial issues which you find annoying, or just material issues, and you'd rather not be having to worry about them, but still you can't help it, and that's not how you'd like it to be, but it's all happening for a reason. And so it may be a good time to organize yourself and to perhaps confront certain issues. Mercury is making a semi-square to both Mars and Jupiter, Mercury being on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. So, if there's something that needs to be said, perhaps of a financial nature, then now might be the time to do it. I mean, you've got to be reasonable. You mustn't be sort of too pushy, and, everything does take some time, and you have to give other people, a chance to explain themselves and a chance to respond. But there's no harm in thinking about money and perhaps taking some action in this direction. But you don't want to get obsessed about money. That's not very suitable, especially if you're a Leo. And instead, Leo, you should regard the most important thing today as being able to almost revel in what you can do. I mean, you should. I mean, Leo is a proud sign, and you've got every right to be proud of yourself. And at the moment, there are things you can do really well. I mean, it's not like loads of things you can do very well. It's just one or two things that you know that they're a fundamental part of who you are, and they're a part of your self-expression. And now is a time to just reveal them. And you can get some really good feedback from other people. People are going to really appreciate what you can do. And perhaps in the first instance, it's not about getting a tangible reward. It's just about getting appreciation. And yeah, you can get that appreciation, especially once the moon moves out of Capricorn into Aquarius. So the moon will be moving into Aquarius, your opposite sign. And so that is about other people, and it's about other people responding to you, and also you responding to them. And I think that you can sort of get the balance right. And if you give people a chance to explain themselves, and you'll find that they will reciprocate. And there is a conjunction between the moon and Pluto. Moon also makes a sextile to Saturn. It makes a sextile to Saturn in Aquarius in Capricorn just before it leaves Aquarius. But with the moon making a conjunction to Pluto, that that aspect does indicate that certain people do need to be taken seriously, and you need to really try to work out why they need to be taken seriously, what is important to them. And again, it's all about reciprocation. If you respect another person and you show that you understand their priorities, they're likely to give you that respect in return. And perhaps one of the more important aspects today is a decile between the Sun and Mars. I mean, it's important for you because it involves the Sun. The Sun is your ruler. So the Sun and Mars are 36 degrees apart. And so with the Sun and Mars being 36 degrees apart, it is about how you assert yourself. It's a very energetic combination, the Sun and Mars. And with that decile, you're trying to create a powerful image for yourself. Having enough power to do everything that you want to do. And to begin with, it might not be easy, especially as the moon is moving into Aquarius. So the moon moving into Aquarius does indicate that you've got to take into account other people. You can't... If you can't ignore them, if you try to ignore them, then you might find that you really can't accomplish very much. But also, it shouldn't be a situation where you have to give in to anyone. You absolutely don't. And this Sun decile Mars allows you to really exert your willpower, but in a very focused and disciplined way. Remember that the Saturn is on the Sun-Mars midpoint, and so perhaps you need to be very disciplined, and perhaps you can be disciplined with another person's help. So don't think, Leo, that you have to do everything on your own. You don't, and there are people out there who are able to help you in the same way that you can help them. So it's not just a one-way flow. So Leo, it's not a day that's necessarily going to be super easy and just super obvious. It's obvious what you need to do, and may not be obvious, and there might be some planning, but perhaps, as I've already indicated, it all starts with who you are and what you can do, and you understanding that you've got something very special. You've always had something special, and now you have a chance to really harness it harness it in such a way that, everyone is a winner. And, most importantly, you get the support and appreciation that you definitely deserve. Virgo. Mercury is really in the spotlight at the moment. A lot of action revolving and involving Mercury. I just talked about, yesterday when I said that Mercury was on the, I think it was yesterday that Mercury was on the Neptune-Pluto midpoint. It was making a quincunx to Neptune, making a quincunx to Pluto. And of course, Mercury has just been square Uranus. And as far as today is concerned, Mercury is making a semi-square to Mars, and it's making a semi-square to Jupiter. So you are highly energized. And Mercury is on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. And so, Virgo, I think I can be almost as positive as I was yesterday. So yesterday, I think I was pretty positive about what could happen for you on Wednesday. I hope you had a great Wednesday. If you didn't have a great Wednesday, you felt that there were things were missing. I mean, don't worry, because a lot of what was going on yesterday, Wednesday, is it's the same as Thursday. It's today. It's perhaps a 2-day process. And at the moment, with Mercury on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, there is a lot you can do, a lot you can achieve, and you have a lot of power at your disposal. And now's the time to really use it. And it's important, Virgo, not to be modest. I mean, Virgo does have a reputation as being a modest sign. I don't know whether that's true, not necessarily, but you can be quite critical of yourself. And I just don't think now is the time to be modest. You have, as I've said, a lot of power at your disposal, and this power works on many different levels. I mean, you're able to talk about yourself in a very positive, excitable way, and even if you're not talking, you can just act. And you might have your doubts. Maybe you're taking too much of a risk. Maybe you're being disruptive. But it doesn't matter. If you start acting, you're likely to see the results very quickly. And it is because Mercury is on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. And if you weren't to do anything, if you were to hold back, well, you'd feel very frustrated, and it just might feel that you're just getting nowhere. And that's not what we want. Though if there is a difference between today and yesterday, well, the moon is moving into Aquarius, and okay, it was nice when the moon was in Capricorn. It was nice when the moon was in an earth sign. But, moon moving into Aquarius has its advantages. So, moon, when it moves into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. And that moon conjunct Pluto can be, Virgo, about you taking yourself seriously and just understanding what needs to be done in an intense but methodical way. So you realize that something has to change, and it might be just about the way you run your life, the way you plan things, the way you organize things. Maybe certain structures and routines have past their sell-by date and they need to change. And with Moon conjunct Pluto, you very much can make those changes. And once you make those changes, that boosts your power. And again, you are powerful at the moment. Mercury, your ruler, is very strongly placed. It's in Virgo. It's in its own sign. And also, Mercury's on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. Though one problem might be that Mercury is making a semi-square to Jupiter, And the problem with Mercury semi-square Jupiter might relate to other people. And you can't expect to get on with everyone. And Mercury semi-square Jupiter might be about a misunderstanding or just a recognition that you and someone else are just not really working very well together. Perhaps you have just different priorities, and maybe you should just accept that. That's just the way it is. But you don't want to take things too far. It is a time, Virgo, in general, with the North Node moving through Pisces, when you can benefit from other people. You can benefit from being in a sort of a cooperative relationship with them. And, with Mercury moving through Virgo and the Sun moving through Virgo in the same sign as the South Node, sometimes Virgos can be too concentrated on themselves. They can be selfish. That is a possibility there. And, you've got to give other people a chance. But with Mercury semi-square Jupiter, it might still become obvious that, you can't get on with everyone. And if you can't get on with someone, well, what do you do? Well, if it's someone who isn't particularly important, well, maybe you can go your separate ways. If you're dealing with someone, on the other hand, who you have to deal with, all the time, then it's different. Then Mercury semi-square Jupiter is challenging, and you have to find a way of accommodating this other person, and you have to ask if you've got some incompatibility coming into the fore. What's it about? Is it something short term, just a temporary hiccup, or is it something longer term that's finally revealing itself, realizing that you and someone else have real differences? Well, what do you do? Well, in that case, you've got to stand up for yourself, but you also got to remember that the North Node is in Pisces. Do make an effort to understand, what that incompatibility might be, and also remember, Mercury semi-square Jupiter is it's quite a short-lived aspect. Mercury is moving quickly, and by tomorrow it won't be such a powerful influence. And so maybe if you feel that you and someone else aren't getting on, it's just a question of waiting it out. Libra. It's nice that the moon is moving into Aquarius. The moon has been in Capricorn. Perhaps it's still in Capricorn, but it is really at the end of Capricorn. And the problem with moon in Capricorn, problem is probably the wrong word to use, but when the moon is in Capricorn, if you are a Libran, then you may not be particularly adventurous. You might be less adventurous than usual. And also we've just had the moon making a square to Mars. We make an opposition to Jupiter, which wasn't particularly easy. And the moon in Capricorn may have been a distraction. And what would you have been distracted by? Well, you might have been distracted by what you thought were your own vital interests. When I say vital interests, I'm thinking perhaps your home or your family or just your emotional comfort zone. And that was where you wanted to be. And so with the moon moving into Aquarius, well, that is easier. Aquarius is an air sign, like Libra, your sign, and so Aquarius is a sign that is about free expression, and also compared to Capricorn, Aquarius is a more adventurous sign, and so with the moon moving into Aquarius, you start to be able to see possibilities, and there might be new things that excite you. And there is the moon makes a conjunction to Pluto in Aquarius, and that reminds you that there are some things which are very precious, and those things which are precious, relate to, your creativity, what you do, what you can do. It's certainly not what other people can do. It's about you, and once you've decided what's important to you, and you're confident in that, then you can afford to sort of reach out, be more sociable, and be more relaxed. And at the same time, Libra, you are at the moment becoming increasingly free with your words. I think at the moment you're able to really express yourself very well, and that's especially the case once the moon moves into Aquarius. Moon moves into Aquarius, late morning if you're in the UK, or sort of very, very early in the morning if you're in the Americas, sort of middle of the night really. If you're in sort of Australasia, that might not be until this evening. But the moon is moving into Aquarius, and so that really does allow you to be open, to think freely, to speak freely, and also just to be aware of what is possible. And you are becoming more adventurous, more optimistic, and that optimism could be quite infectious. And this optimism has been building up for the last couple of days. And if you start to have good thoughts, and if you start to think about what is possible, then it really starts a virtuous circle. You start having a positive impact on yourself and also on other people. So you are a good person to have around, very much so. And at the same time, you haven't forgotten what is important. You haven't forgotten your core ambitions. We do have a square aspect between Mars and Jupiter. Mars is moving through Libra. It is square Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is moving through a very high profile sector of your chart. So that Mars-Jupiter square is very much a plus, and it reminds you that there's so much that you can achieve. And it's just the beginning. Jupiter stays in Cancer until June, and really make the most of it. And with Mars making that square to Jupiter, you can be assertive, and you don't have to compromise, not really. And I don't think there'll be much in the way of opposition. In fact, there might be less opposition than usual, because now we've got Saturn has moved out of Aries. And so with Saturn moving out of Aries, because Aries is your opposite sign, that might indicate less pressure from other people. Certain people who had been taking up a lot of your time, a lot of your concentration, they've sort of drifted away temporarily. I mean, Saturn does, of course, go back into Aries in the end, in I think February of next year. But while Saturn is out of Aries, that gives you a breathing space, and now's a time to be focusing on other things like that Mars-Jupiter square, which really can be harnessed, and so you can be really using it to pursue your agenda. Though there are different ways of looking at that Mars-Jupiter square. I can look at it in terms of your ambitions and what you're trying to achieve. For example, in your career. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is to say, well, Mars is ruler of Aries. Aries is your opposite sign, and so with Mars in Libra making a square to Jupiter, someone may be making a lot of noise, and they may be trying to get your attention, and you might be inclined to think that you have to give them this attention, or even that you have to, do things their way. But if you do find yourself in that kind of situation, you shouldn't exaggerate anyone's strength and importance. Someone who is trying to get your attention is probably in a relatively weak position, and they might even be reliant on you. So, yeah, you yourself can be self-reliant if you want to be, but other people may see you as being the answer or as the solution. And, I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I mean, it can be a bad thing if everyone is reliant on you, or at least just one person is reliant on you, because that might seem like a lot of responsibility. On the other hand, that does give you a lot of power. If someone is relying on you, then you can exploit the situation. And Librans are very good at exploiting the situation. I mean, Libra, as a sign, can be very powerful. As I keep saying, a lot of very effective politicians in the past and the present were Librans. Margaret Thatcher, Vladimir Putin, for example. And so, the right Libra can use these power relations and the fact that people are dependent on you to create a situation where they are in control. And I think that that's what you should be trying to do at the moment. Scorpio. As I said yesterday, Mars is really in the spotlight. Mars is making a square to Jupiter, and it's also making a semi-square to Mercury. So, it is a major aspect, this Mars square Jupiter. I mean, it's the Mars square Jupiter. Okay, it's exact tomorrow, but it's pretty much exact today as well. And so, Scorpio, this means that things could be larger than life. They could be exaggerated. And Scorpio, you might not be entirely comfortable with this situation. Part of you, Scorpio, would like to just disappear. It's all too much. There's just too much action, too much energy. Everyone is frenetic. Do you need this kind of bother? And you might say, well, maybe you don't. But still, Mars is square Jupiter. What are you going to do? And the challenge here is to make the most of things and to create a situation which is concordant with your particular worldview. And possibly the best way of using this Mars-Jupiter square would be to kind of elevate yourself and to be honest about what might be missing, and perhaps there are things you don't know enough about. And one approach with Mars square Jupiter would be to spend some time learning. You don't have to spend a long time learning, but it would be a good challenge. And maybe part of the reason you're feeling a little frustrated is that you can see that things are complicated or appear to be complicated, and there are things going on that you don't completely understand, and that might be a good reason to run for the hills. But if you don't understand something, or it just feels just too complicated, then perhaps instead you should make it your business to really know what is going on, whatever it takes. And that might be asking people questions. That might be reading a book, watching a video. Whatever it takes. So that might be a constructive way of using this Mars square Jupiter. Also, it might be something of a spiritual nature. Perhaps your path, whatever that path is, needs some realignment, and something is telling you, well, you've got it almost right, but not quite right. And if you want to pursue your true destiny, some adjustments might be needed. But who am I to tell a Scorpio what their destiny is? And then we've got Mercury is semisquare Mars, and Mercury is semisquare Jupiter. And Mercury might represent a solution. Mercury is about you maybe understanding something through friendship, through conversation, through social interaction. So social interaction might appear to be a waste of time. Why bother? This is not a time where you feel that you really want to surround yourself with other people. But social interaction definitely has its benefits. And perhaps through contact with the right people, you can start to understand something, like never before, or even just for the first time. Something is pointed out to you and it makes sense. And so, don't feel, Scorpio, that you have to do everything on your own, though I do understand that is going to be your inclination, especially once the moon moves into Aquarius. Once the moon moves into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. That's a very intense conjunction to Pluto. And so with that conjunction, you might be tempted to just be where you are, almost to be rooted to the spot. And okay, there may be things you need to discover, need to work out in your own way, in your own space, but don't take it too far, and don't exaggerate. Sagittarius. Jupiter is quite prominent at the moment. Jupiter is your ruler, and Jupiter's influence, is difficult to avoid. And we've got a square between Mars and Jupiter. We've also got a semi-square between Mercury and Jupiter. So Mercury and Mars are sort of coming together to maybe irritate you. And what is it about irritation? Is it a good thing to be irritated? It might be a good thing to be irritated. Sagittarius, you mustn't assume that you've got everything sorted out. And sometimes you need reminders. And so, with Mars square Jupiter, it's possible that you're told something or something is explained to you and it's just not in accordance with your particular view of the world. And what do? You could just dig in, just say, well, you've got everything sorted out, there's no need to take outside advice. You could do that, but I don't think that's the right approach. And Mars square Jupiter is perhaps a challenge. Mars square Jupiter is challenging you to listen, and Mercury semi-square Jupiter is maybe challenging you to go further and to be more open, and kind of ironically to be more of a Sagittarius. I know you are a Sagittarius, obviously, but sometimes Sagittarius, there can be times when you are just not quite yourself, and you would like to be keeping a low profile and not sharing your energy with others. And this Mercury semi-square Jupiter is just saying, hold on, this is not the right approach. You have got to be more open. You've got to be yourself. And those reminders, are going to be everywhere. Those reminders might come through another person. They might come through your social and perhaps professional activities. As soon as you're with other people in a high-profile setting, the challenges start. And so don't feel that you can keep a low profile. You might like to, but I just don't think that's I don't think that is the right approach. And the more you're seen and heard, the better. And so what do you need to do today? What kind of impact do you need to have? And it's okay. You needn't worry about the consequences. And also just remember that Jupiter is in Cancer. Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. It does give you great strength. And additionally, with Mercury semi-square Jupiter, you've got a lot to say. And you've especially got a lot to say, once the moon moves into Aquarius. So moon in Aquarius allows you to be original and independent-minded, but independent-minded in a sociable way. You're telling people, how things are. You're giving them, your views on perhaps the way the world is going. And perhaps that feeds into the fact that we've got a trine between Uranus and Pluto. I mean, this Uranus-Pluto trine, but I've been talking about it in places in this video. I mean, it is a trine between slow-moving planets, and it's slowly moving out of orb. I mean, Uranus is about to turn retrograde, and it will move further and further away from Pluto, and before moving into Taurus. But this Uranus trine Pluto is quite liberating, and it's also quite revolutionary. And so Sagittarius, you can be part of this revolution. You can be part of the change. I mean, if you observe change from a distance, and I'm not talking just about today, I'm talking about the next few months, the next year even. If you observe change from a distance, then you have a lack of agency because you're just caught up in this change and you have to just respond. But if you can instead be the revolution, be at the center of things and listen to what you're being told, and if you're encouraged to do something, then probably you should take that seriously. And and that does mean being a Sagittarius, finding that fire and that spontaneity that really wants to reveal itself. Capricorn. The moon is leaving your sign, getting ready to leave your sign perhaps. And so with the moon moving into Aquarius, as it will do at some stage today, your focus might change. You might become more concerned about what you have, what you don't have, and financial matters might come to the fore. You've got moon conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, and there might be things that you regard as being very, very important, really, really worth holding on to. And I think that that is fine. And if something is important to you of a material nature, then stick with it. But it needn't be too much of a struggle. You're just naturally demonstrating your Capricorn personality. In a Capricorn, you know what matters, and Capricorn, is an earth sign. Now, aside from that, we do have a square between Mars and Jupiter, and this Mars-Jupiter square might also be connected to some of your ambitions and what you're trying to do. And while you have your ambitions, you're also aware of the fact that there are other people to deal with. There are outside pressures, and Mars square Jupiter might be challenging you to work out how best to deal with these pressures. And it might appear that you and other people perhaps are going in different directions, and this might be irritating. But just because someone is being stubborn and is refusing to compromise, it doesn't mean that they're wrong. And sometimes people are being stubborn for a reason. they're holding out for something, and that might be the Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer, remember Jupiter is, it's in your opposite sign, Cancer. It's going to be there until June, and so it's on and off going to be an important theme between now and June. How you deal with certain people, how you relate to them, and whether or not they're a good or a bad influence in your life. And sometimes you have to consider the possibility that someone knows more than you, or that they have a wisdom that they're able to sort of impart. And so if someone is being stubborn, they may be being stubborn for a reason, and it may be frustrating for you, but perhaps you should understand why another person believes what they believe in. And if you're honest with yourself, you might recognize that they've got a point. Yeah, that really is possible. So relationships today could be difficult, particularly if you take things at face value. But if you try to sort of understand, what is really going on, then you might get a different picture. And another configuration we've got is what we've got Saturn on the Sun-Mars midpoint, and I think I talked about this yesterday, and I think that this is a major configuration. The Sun and Mars are in decile aspect to each other. Sun and Mars are two very fiery planets, very energetic, and they can get out of control. I mean, Sun-Mars aspects can be associated with fires and explosions, and perhaps the force of the universe, maybe the creative force of the universe, the energy which is within every atom. And Saturn, opposition to Sun-Mars midpoint, well, that says something about Saturn and what you are trying to create and what you are trying to bring down to earth. And it may be that there is something very energetic about you, and also powerful, and maybe even fiery. I mean, fiery is not a word we normally associate with Capricorn, but you've got that inner fire somewhere. And Saturn opposition the Sun-Mars midpoint may allow you to, in some way, get in contact with that fire and realize, what you need to do to, make it real, to make it happen. And it, to begin with, might seem a slow process, but if you keep working on it, you keep trying to sort of you have to be optimistic, you have to be open to new possibilities, but at the same time you have to be disciplined. It's a very hard balance to get, but if you get it right, you might finally find what you're looking for. And so suddenly Capricorn could sort of explode. I mean, in a positive way, finding that inner energy, and in that way, everyone can be lit up and inspired by you. Aquarius, Moon is moving into your sign at some stage today. Might be very early in the day if you're in the Americas. It could be this evening in Australasia. But, when the Moon moves into Aquarius, you are going to be feeling better about yourself, more positive, more powerful, and at the same time you're going to start to sort of really understand what is happening, because there have been things going on that you haven't always understood. You might have been confused. You weren't quite sure what was going on, but now it's starting to make sense. And it's making sense not necessarily in such a way that you can verbalize. It just inspirationally makes sense. And, what's happening is that, the Moon, it's moving into Aquarius. Then it's making a conjunction to Pluto, and it's making a trine to Uranus. And so that's going to be, very uplifting. And you need to think about, what is that? What does that Uranus trine Pluto mean? I probably should have talked more about that Uranus trine Pluto in previous videos, but I do think that it's an important aspect. And as I said, at the beginning of this video, it's about the need for change. All of us feel a need for change. We know that change is about to happen. Uranus is a planet of revolution. Pluto is a planet of transformation, and so Uranus, Pluto, you put them together, you might say, well, revolutionary transformation. And Pluto is in your sign. Uranus is in Gemini, an air sign, so it's a sort of Aquarius-friendly sign. So with the moon conjunct Pluto and trine Uranus, I'm hoping, Aquarius, that you're going to feel a sense of excitement, that something is happening, that you are part of the change. You want to be in control. You don't just want to be a passenger. And if you refuse to participate, well, then you'll just get carried along with it, and you won't be able to shape the end result. So if things are going on, at whatever level, it depends on your situation. Might be things going on, what you and your family are interested in. It might be your friends, might be society, might be the world. At whatever level you want to work at, you can be part of the change, and you can be one of the instigators. And maybe that's what you should be aiming for. And you are, I think, helped by the fact that Saturn, your ruler, is opposition the Sun-Mars midpoint. And this is an aspect, I talked about it yesterday, and I'm going to talk about it again. I don't want to repeat myself, but the Sun and Mars are these very fiery, energetic planets. And that perhaps, links back to what I was talking about with this change. You don't have to take things as they are. You can overthrow things if they're not good enough, if you want something new. And so with Saturn opposition the Sun-Mars midpoint, you might, to begin with, feel that you're in a hopeless situation, that you can't create change, that there are so many reasons why you are stuck. But Saturn is about structure, it's about work, it's about discipline, it's about just seeing things through in a solid and methodical way, and also having good planning. And with that good planning, you can create a situation where you really are in control. And so Sagittarius, so Aquarius, you have what it takes, and there's every reason to be excited, and because things are happening, and you really can be at the center of everything. Pisces, it's potentially a dramatic day. I've been talking about this drama, to all of the 12 signs, and different signs are going to relate to things in different ways. As far as you're concerned, you're perhaps still getting used to the fact that Saturn is now in Pisces. I think it was on Monday that Saturn moved back into Pisces. Saturn is now in your sign, and so Saturn as a planet can be quite sensible. It understands its limitations, and so when you look at all the action going on around you, you may not necessarily want to participate in it. It just might be or feel just too much of an effort, and perhaps you'd rather just look at things from afar. That does mean that you don't have much control over the end result because you are looking at things from afar. But maybe you're happy with that. Maybe that's fine. But it's it's difficult to relax, even if you are miles away from the action, because Mars is square Jupiter. Mars is an energetic planet, and it's square Jupiter, which is your ruler, and that might mean that your emotions are responding to what is going on. You know that perhaps something big is happening, and you can feel it, Mars square Jupiter, and it's just an agitation. And so it might be difficult to relax. And the further you are from the action, perhaps the less relaxed you are. And that's, of course, the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. You might think that by withdrawing, you're making things easier for yourself, but not necessarily, because you haven't emotionally distanced yourself. And so perhaps you should be at the center of things. Perhaps you should join the fray. It might be of some concern to you, but don't forget, Saturn has come back into Pisces. This means that you can be very disciplined, and you can be a force for good. Maybe some people are out of control. Maybe some people don't know what they're doing, and maybe you can come in and you can sort things out, and you can also give people the benefit of your own perspective. You certainly have a perspective, and you have ideas. And in fact, right now, Pisces, you've got some pretty amazing ideas, and it would be a shame if you just kept these ideas to yourself. There is inspiration here, and if you start to talk about your ideas, you might not want to talk about your ideas, but if you talk about your ideas, your view of the world, I think it will sound very compelling. People will listen. And so, Pisces, you have got a contribution to make. And if you want an easy day, or a day which is as easy as relaxed as possible, it just may be that you have to make this contribution, and that distancing yourself might seem the easiest approach, but it might be more trouble than it's worth, certainly in terms of that frustration and that tension. You don't know why you're feeling tense, and perhaps the reason you're feeling tense is because you're not part of something. You've got something to contribute, but you're not contributing it, and so you're stuck with this sort of unused energy, and you need to use that energy. You need to find an expression of this energy. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and it's now time to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 27, the corners of the mouth. Now, this hexagram doesn't move. It's locked. So what is the corners of the mouth about? The corners of the mouth could be about speech, what we're saying. So there could be a big focus on what we say. Our words matter. And that makes sense given that Mercury is semi-square Mars today, and it's also semi-square Jupiter, and Mercury is on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. So there is a lot to be said. Now, because this hexagram is locked, just because there's a lot of words doesn't mean there's much in the way of action. And I know that when I've gone through the 12 signs, I've said there's all sorts of stuff going on. We've got the build up to Mars square Jupiter. We've got Mercury semi-square Mars, Mercury semi-square Jupiter. It looked like quite an active day, but the I Ching is providing a different view. And with nothing moving, no moving lines, maybe things really aren't going anywhere. And there's a lot of empty words. Or maybe we have to deal with what's on our plate. And that's another feature of this hexagram. It can be about having taken on a lot. I mean, literally, we've stuffed our mouth. We've got all this food in our mouth, and we now have to digest it. It's not a time for eating anything else. We've got enough to deal with as it is. And so that might be what we're doing. Perhaps there have been experiences, things we've learnt, things we've been told, and we just have to really understand, what it's all about. And the understanding relates not just to ourselves, but it's also about other people. And what the I Ching tells us with the corners of the mouth. This is a hexagram that comes up quite often for some reason. At least appears to come up quite often in my readings. And what I like to say with corners of the mouth is that you have to look at what other people are eating, what is important for other people, because that's a good way of judging them. Whatever it is, whether it's money, power, food, whatever. Once you know that, once you know what turns someone on, you're in a better position to evaluate them, and you can decide, what kind of relationship you want with them. Maybe you want to decide that you don't want any relationship with them. So that is a way in which the corners of the mouth can work. And we do have to think about the nuclear hexagram. I mean, the nuclear hexagram is easy here, because if we knock off the top and the bottom lines, we just see broken lines. So the nuclear hexagram is going to be hexagram number 2, which is the receptive. And so the underlying picture with the corners of the mouth is nothing. Just observing, dealing what we already have in our mouth. It's not about doing anything new. It's not about introducing anything new into the equation. We just have to accept things as they are, understand things as they are, observe, finish what's on our plate, and that should be what our day is like. Yeah, there might be a lot of action outside, but we don't want to get too involved, because we've got enough to deal with as it is. And perhaps tomorrow, when we perhaps get a new hexagram, then perhaps we can think about something new. But right now, I'm not quite sure if there's anything that we need to do which is new. It's all about understanding other people, watching them, and finishing what is on our plate. And now I want to finish by looking at Graham Linehan, who is really in the news in the UK and beyond. And so Graham Linehan, he is a comedian and a comedy writer, and he was particularly famous for writing Father Ted. And Father Ted was a sitcom. I think it was a sitcom in the 90s, and centered around a Catholic parish in Ireland. And so you had this Catholic priest, Father Ted, and it was widely acclaimed. So he was famous for that. And he did other stuff. I mean, I don't really know much about him. He did something called the IT crowd. Again, I don't know anything about it, but people go on and on about it if you look at Wikipedia. And so he had a successful life, and then something went wrong. In 2008, there was an episode of the IT crowd called The Speech, which was perceived as perhaps being disrespectful to trans people. And from then on, I believe he started to lose work, lose contracts. He was cancelled, and he became, if you like, an anti-trans activist. He believes that sort of women are women, and that men should not go into women's spaces, even if they're dressed as women. And so, that's his view. And he was arrested on Monday. He was arrested at Heathrow Airport on, I think, at 1:00 on September the 1st by apparently 5 armed police officers. And the reason he was arrested was because he made some tweets in April, and the tweets related to his views on trans. And so, for example, he tweeted, I think in April he tweeted, "If a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent, abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him." And then he referenced a particular part of the body. So that was regarded as being incitement to violence. He also tweeted, he had a picture of a trans rally, and he had the caption, "A photo you can smell." And then a third tweet was, "I hate them, misogynists and homophobes. F asterisk 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 M." So that's why he got arrested. And so it was considered to be suspicion of inciting violence. So what he was doing is he was, expressing his free speech via Twitter, and so it's gone all around the world, and people have been suggesting that Britain is becoming like North Korea. There have been other people who've been arrested for what they've been tweeting in different contexts. So, for example, about their views on migration, and so there is this appearance that free speech is under real pressure in the UK, and other people are noticing. For example, J.D. Vance has noticed this, and that's, you can see that in the context of what J.D. Vance was telling Europeans. That's a security conference earlier in the year in Munich, telling people freedom is being lost, and so. Graham Linehan Graham Linehan is someone who can look after himself. Although when he was arrested, it was quite serious. I mean, he was arrested by these 5 armed police officers, and his blood pressure apparently went up to 200. And he remarked that this is kind of a level at which you could get a stroke. So his arrest potentially could have killed him, and I think he had to go to hospital. So it wasn't just the fact that he lost his liberty. It put him under a lot of physical pressure. So let's look at Graham Linehan's horoscope. Here is his chart. I don't have his time of birth, but he was born on May the 22nd, 1968. In Dublin, so I've gone for a noon chart, and you can see that he's got 3 planets in Gemini, Sun, Mars and Mercury. So Sun, Mars and Mercury in Gemini, that fits with someone who is a comedy writer, someone who makes jokes, amuses people, and has perhaps a quick wit. And what's kind of interesting about those Gemini planets, I kind of knew he was a Gemini from sort of May the 22nd, but I hadn't looked at his chart in detail. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder, does he have Mercury square Uranus? And I thought, yeah, maybe he does. Because I've just looked at Mercury square Uranus. I mean, I've mentioned that, J.D. Vance and Rachel Ziegler have Mercury square Uranus. And if you've got Mercury square Uranus, you can say things which supposedly cause offence, which upset people. And indeed, he does have Mercury square Uranus. So his Mercury in Gemini is square Uranus in Virgo. And, Mercury square Uranus, again, if you're a comedy writer, that would be a great thing to have. Mercury in Gemini, quick-witted. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I, having Mercury in Gemini. But my Mercury in Gemini is it's very close to the sun and it's retrograde, but his Mercury in Gemini, it's not retrograde. It's quite a long way from the sun, and yeah, it's square Uranus, so there is that quick wit, and also Mercury square Uranus, you can get yourself into trouble by what you say, by what you tweet, what you write, and so that's one aspect of his chart. And additionally, he has a moon in Aries, so moon in Aries can be someone who likes to express themselves. I don't know where his moon is exactly. I know it's in Aries, but because I don't have his time of birth, but it'll be anywhere between, I don't know, approximately 2 degrees and 14 Aries, something like that. So somewhere in the first half of Aries. So moon in Aries can be quite spontaneous, likes to say what's on its mind. It can be quite aggressive, quite angry, moon in Aries. And, that kind of fits with what we know about him. I mean, I have a certain sympathy with anyone who has a moon in Aries and a sun in Gemini, because I myself have moon in Aries and sun in Gemini. I'm afraid I don't quite have his wit, but there you go. I think that seems to be quite indicative of the kind of person he is. And he has Mars in Gemini. So Mars in Gemini is a verbally aggressive planet, so it says what it believes. It can get annoyed, and it can get upset about things. And his sun is on his Venus-Mars midpoint. You can see he's got Venus at 23 Taurus, Mars at 9 degrees Gemini. So the sun is exactly on his Venus-Mars midpoint. And that kind of fits as well, because, there are many ways in which we can look at Venus-Mars, but Venus-Mars can be about gender and gender issues, Venus and Mars. And so with the sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint, it would seem that he takes gender issues very seriously. When I was thinking about his chart, I was thinking to myself, does he have anything on the Venus-Mars midpoint? And yeah, having the sun in Gemini on the Venus-Mars midpoint, he has got lots to say about the subject of gender. I mean, that doesn't mean to say that everyone who's got sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint is going to be very concerned about gender issues and transgender issues, but in his case, he's picked up on it, and it certainly fits the symbolism of his horoscope. Now, it would appear that Graham Linehan's troubles started during the airing of one episode of one of his shows. So he did this show called the IT Crowd. I don't know anything about it, by the way, but it was apparently incredibly successful. And the episode that got him into trouble was called The Speech. And the speech, apparently it said something that was disrespectful to trans people. And it aired, I think, at 5 minutes past 10 on Channel 4 on December the 12th, 2008. I mean, I've gone for sort of London time. And so perhaps we can see the problems here. I mean, the moon is in Gemini, so he is a Gemini. There was a full moon on Gemini, and the moon was opposition true black moon Lilith. And I think that moon opposition true black moon Lilith, is significant, because true black moon Lilith, is about things which are dark and maybe twisted. And so somehow this episode brought it all out. Now, that does depend on your view. Now, you could argue that trans ideology is perhaps rather dark and twisted. I mean, you could say that. I'm not saying that is the case, but you might. And so this episode, at least for Graham Linehan, brought it all out into the open. And his Mercury, let me just show you the lineup between the airing of the episode and his chart. So he has Mercury on the moon, on the So he has Mercury at 23 Gemini. So there was a Black Moon Lilith opposition at the time of his airing hitting his Mercury. So his Mercury was kind of perhaps picking up on what was going on in society, and the fact that it got such a response in the end, and it led to him being cancelled and contracts being suddenly ended and him not being able to get any work. So he was understanding something in society, and I suppose that is the element. I mean, a key part of being a comedian, being able to see something before it happened. I mean, one thinks of that line in Life of Brian with "Call Me Loretta," isn't it? "Call Me Loretta." I think it was when the disciples were discussing something, and one of them decided they wanted to be called a woman, and that was, of course, in the 70s, and they suddenly said, "Call me Loretta," and so that perhaps shows that Monty Python were really thinking ahead, and that scene, the "Call Me Loretta" scene from Life of Brian, seems to be incredibly relevant like now. And so perhaps, that is that's sort of a key part of being a comedian. And aside from that, there were some sort of other things going on. At the time of that airing, Mercury was conjunct Pluto. So it was an exact Mercury conjunct Pluto in the first degree of Capricorn. And Mercury-Pluto is, it's a powerful message which gets a powerful response. I mean, it shouldn't have been a powerful message. It was just something he said in one episode of his show, but Mercury conjunct Pluto says something about the response, and perhaps it also says something about Pluto in Capricorn, because I suppose it was in Pluto, while Pluto was in Capricorn, that the transgender thing really snowballed. And additionally, the midheaven was if I've got the 10:05 screening time right, the midheaven was conjunct Graham Linehan's Venus. And so Venus says, something about his attitude to women, that he regards women as being women, and you can't just decide to be a woman. You can't just identify as being a woman, just like that. And look how Saturn was at 21-26 Virgo. So transiting Saturn was square his Venus, and so suddenly the whole issue of femininity for him with the screening of this show became important. And so in the end, he became an activist. He's often described as an anti-trans activist. And then there is his arrest. So he was arrested, I think, at 1:00 in the afternoon, at sort of lunchtime, in Heathrow Airport. So here is the chart for his arrest. The astrology program I'm using doesn't have Heathrow in its list of places, but it does have Hounslow. Hounslow is a suburb of West London, which is pretty close to Heathrow. It's close enough. And so the time of his arrest, the sun was exactly on the midheaven, and there had just been a first quarter moon. So the first quarter moon was August the 31st at 8°7 Sagittarius. So it's kind of picking up on the first quarter moon. And as far as the transits to Graham Linehan's horoscope are concerned, the big transit, the one that really stands out is Uranus on his sun. So, I mean, obviously I don't know what time he was born, but his noon sun is at 1°24 Gemini. And so Uranus was almost exactly conjunct his sun. And, that fits really well. I mean, just a sudden event. His blood pressure goes up to 200. He's arrested by 5 armed police officers. So that doesn't really need any explanation. And also don't forget that on August the 23rd, there was a new moon at 0 degrees 23 Virgo. So you could say that that new moon was square his sun and was perhaps a precursor to it. And the moon was, the transiting moon was opposition his Mercury. So his Mercury perhaps getting him into trouble again. And one thing though that I thought was interesting about this, and this kind of relates to something I was saying about Saturn in Pisces, is that Saturn went back into Pisces that day. This was the day Saturn moved out of Aries into Pisces, and I do believe that with Saturn and Neptune moving through Pisces over the last few years, well, Neptune sort of longer than that, Pisces, I think, is about the obsession with sort of woke and diversity, and also transgender. If someone wants to identify Pisces, well, let them do it. And of course, Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is a very moralistic planet. So the day Saturn moves into Pisces is the day that, certainly for Graham Linehan, transgender issues suddenly come into real focus, because he gets arrested for his tweets. In April. Of course, last April, Saturn was Saturn was in Pisces last April. But anyway, so Saturn moves into Aries, and in the moment Saturn moves back, we get this whole issue coming to the fore again. And maybe this says something about Saturn in Pisces and how we're going to experience Saturn in Pisces between now and Valentine's Day, 13th, 14th of February, when Saturn finally moves into Aries. And so perhaps there's something we thought we'd got over, this transgender obsession. There had been this ruling in Scotland saying that women are women, but perhaps it's kind of a retrograde step. But I do find that interesting. And it does seem to confirm maybe that Pisces, Neptune and Saturn in Pisces was about just being overly obsessed about other people's identifications, and one should just do everything one can to support perhaps what is a very small minority, and a small vocal minority who are perhaps taking advantage of this sort of obsession with giving people any rights, even rights that really perhaps are just overstated, and in the process forgetting the more fundamental right, which is the right to free speech. And of course that's why the Linehan arrest is such a big deal, and why it's not just big news in the UK. And maybe the UK is turning into North Korea. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.